realized I never film videos when my hair are popping, only when they look yellow and my roots have regrown. You guys never get to see me at my best and it's truly tragic. Speaking of tragic, 2020 is over. Happy New Year! And that is not tragic at all. But 2020, that year was disgusting. I don't even want to talk about it. So to celebrate it being done and over with, I wanted to reminisce on the shows I watched this year. Let's go. So I've been watching BL dramas for almost 4 years now, and this is the first year I felt genuinely overwhelmed with the releases. This is also the first year of my entire life where I watched this many shows, but honestly I don't even know how I would have survived without them. So, this ranking is only going to concern 2020 shows or shows where at least half of the episodes were released in 2020. So before we start, let's have a really quick round of the older shows I watched in 2020 from my favorite to my least favorite.
Sleepless Society Insomnia, Weightlifting Fairy Kim Bok-joo, Happy Birthday, The Untamed, I Hate You, I Love You, His I Didn't Think I'd Fall in Love with You, Hormones, Meant to Be, Welcome to Waikiki, Tumbling, Love at First Hate, Residential Complex, Q Series, Close Your Eyes Before It's Dark, My Bromance, Shoot I Love You, Love Poison, Ugly Duckling Perfect Match, My Dear Warrior, I Found Love in 7-Eleven, Choosing Spouse by Lottery, Shujinko and I'm really sorry about the pronunciation, Teenage Mom, and finally Fleet of Time, which was the most terrible show ever. Please never watch it. Now, before we start the real thing, I just want to talk about the 2020 shows that won't be a part of this ranking simply because they haven't finished airing yet. Friendzone 2 Dangerous Area. This is a really good sequel for me, where I care a lot more about the characters because I've already seen them in the last season, and they're a lot better developed. Tonhon Chonati. Sadly, while I really love the cast and the show is entertaining and funny, this one falls in the category of forgettable BL dramas for me, and I don't think I'll remember much of it once it ends. Ingredients. This show is lovely and the acting is very natural. It's just much too long and a lot of the episodes were useless in my opinion. If it had been a 10 or 12 episodes long series, it could have been a lot better. I adore the soundtrack though. Pearl Next Door. I love Pearl and all the characters in the show, but I've always despised love triangles, so the plot of the show doesn't really interest me. I love that it's GL with a bisexual lead though. Gen Y. As someone who was still heartbroken about the original Two Moons, this made it all better. I'm genuinely loving this show and I can't wait to see how it all ends. Manner of Death. This show keeps me on my tiptoes. I love seeing BL dramas branch out into other genres, so I'm really enjoying it. Now it's time for the actual ranking. Here are the 2020 shows I watched in 2020, from worst to best. Let's get to it because I have a lot of shows to cover. So Much in Love. I've said it before, but this is the worst show, period. The story is all over the place and it's not helped by the fact that the English subtitles were horrible. It has way too many characters, most of them useless to the series, which keeps the actual important characters from being developed in any kind of way. The acting wasn't terrible for some, but others just made their lines look scripted and unnatural. The production is so bad, with shaky cameras and a really poor sound quality. The ships were cute, but their story was so badly written, it's just not worth it. Sakristan. I don't know why I watched this, but it only made me waste precious minutes of my life. The production quality is terrible, the acting isn't great, and the story is just badly written. There are a lot better low-budget series out there than this one. Turn Left, Turn Right. The cast was amazing, but even they couldn't save how bad this show is. Every character is deeply unlikable, the story is frustrating to go through, and there isn't even a clever moral at the end of all of this. This was just bad. The Shipper. This was such a waste of a great cast. This show felt boring for half of it, and the ending was so unsatisfying. The acting was great, but it couldn't save how much of a disappointment this show ended up being. Also, the BL shipper trope is getting old. Can they stop making shows about it, please? End of Love, Love Mechanics. I didn't like this one at all, which is why I'm very surprised this ship became as big as it did and it's getting a sequel. The acting was quite mediocre, Wiz character was absolutely terrible, the relationship was toxic as hell, and I just didn't root for them at all. The CEO. I watched this because I thought it would be BL, but it wasn't. It's not terrible for such a short web series, but it didn't add anything to my life either. Chasing Sunsets. I appreciate that this is GL and deals with mental health issues, but the storyline was confusing and the acting not really good. End of Love, This Is Love Story. This didn't add anything to my life. Literally watching Air would be the same as watching this. Skinship. This is basically one long ad. The actors did their best, but the story is super basic and nothing can save it from being forgettable. Hotel Stars. I watched this one for SB5, but it was just so boring. Most characters except Keen and Tone were annoying and the story dragged on for way too long. Again, no value to it whatsoever. Craving You. This one falls into the category of forgettable BL dramas for me. There is nothing super wrong about it, but nothing stands out either. It's very forgettable except for that one makeout scene at the end. Victorila. I watched this for my babe Earth Pirapat and it wasn't bad. It's just pretty useless and I didn't really feel overly invested with the storyline. Oxygen. This was pretty boring. I liked both ships, but neither of them really stood out to me, though Pukao had a lot of potential. The production was pretty good and the acting too. It's just that the story for me didn't hit what I like when watching romance. Until We Meet Again. Very unpopular opinion, but I didn't really like this show. It dragged on for way too long. It felt like more than half of the episodes were the exact same, with them learning a new piece of information and crying. The acting was good and I liked Tim Win and Incorn, but for me, Dean Parm really didn't have the best chemistry and had some pretty weird moments. It's not a bad show and I understand why so many people consider it their favorite BL, but it's just not for me. End of Love, Tosara. This completely falls in the category of forgettable mediocre BL dramas, but I did like it more than the other two from this series, probably because it was the first one I watched. But the story is just about two dudes falling in love and I find that pretty wholesome. It was cute, but for me the biggest obstacle to it being better was the acting. Wish You. Again, forgettable BL. I think the actors did a good job and the production was good despite the low budget, but the actual development of the relationship was way too quick for me to truly care about them. The story also just doesn't stand out in my opinion. Calculating Love. I honestly preferred the first two episodes of the series without all the new characters and new settings, but I do still have a little bias for this one. I think the acting was good and while the story is extremely basic, it still felt interesting. This one is not revolutionary by any means, but I appreciated it. Because of You. Again, mediocre and forgettable BL. The story is pretty messy, but I didn't dislike it either. There were some good elements to it that I wish would have been developed more, but sadly it just stayed very surface level for me. Mr. Heart. This was okay. The acting was good, the production was good, the story not that enticing to be honest. Stage of Love. This is very mediocre, yet it does kinda have my heart. Some will say this isn't better than Mr. Heart or Because of You, but the story touched me more and even though it's kinda garbage, it's my garbage. Friend Forever. I feel like only Thai shows can do mediocre shows that are still lovable like this one. There's too many characters, the plot is messy, the acting is only decent, yet this was still enjoyable. I like the ships, I like the characters, and even though this show is hella purposeless, it still really entertained me. Sci-Fi Zone Story. This was a pretty useless sequel, but gosh do I adore Sci-Fi Zone. They have such a soft and beautiful chemistry that I can't get enough of. Oh Mando. Usually when I'm just okay about a series, it's because the idea was good but the execution was bad. This series is the exact opposite. I think they did exactly what they set out to do and it was good, but the cheating storyline took me out of it. I just feel like every BL has moved on from cheating storylines and I prefer it that way. I also think it went against the characters' personalities and happened kind of out of nowhere. Do I gotta say big cuddles for the bisexual representation and the respectful representation of depression. The YYY special. I love Letale and I love Not Pun, but this sequel was weird, dude. I don't know if some of it was lost in translation, but I was confused half of the time. The chemistry and acting were still great though, but for me that was a pretty useless sequel. I hope the actual season 2 will be better. My Gear and Your Gown. This had so much potential, but it ended up pretty forgettable and mediocre. The story could have slayed my life, the acting was pretty good and I really liked the cast, but the execution of it was just not great, with not enough interesting moments to make the show memorable. The side couple had more cute scenes than the main one. Also a ship pure one and I'm mad the writers gave them shippy moments for nothing. One Night Still. This one had an interesting plot but just went on for way too long for me. I feel like it would fit a movie 1,000 times better because it got boring and messy when the first few episodes were honestly quite good. I didn't hate it at all, but I wouldn't rewatch it. Girl Next Room Motorbike Baby. I quite enjoyed this show as I watched it, but compared to the other shows from this series, it's definitely the least good even though it contains a real-life couple. The male lead just wasn't that likable and I didn't really find myself rooting for them, especially when Flu Gawin was playing guitar and looking adorable. I like that the main character had depression, but I wish it would have been more developed as mental health is not explored nearly enough in Thai dramas. Why are you? The show is kinda trash, not gonna lie. I mean, it's not terrible, but it has way too many characters and ships, and the storyline is almost non-existent. The chemistry and acting were both amazing though, and again, Scifi doesn't have all my heart, so in terms of entertainment value, this show was one of the most entertaining of the year. Roommate. For a low-budget series, this was pretty fun. I feel like the length and pacing was just right and the acting and chemistry were okay. I was entertained and while this is pretty forgettable, I can see myself rewatching it eventually. The Underclass. I watched for my man Montanucci, of course, and this definitely wasn't what I expected it to be. I thought it would be more of an action-focused show like The Gifted and Blacklist, but it ended up being more of a coming-of-age story, which I didn't necessarily mind, but also made me lose interest in the more action-oriented scenes. Amty, me too. I felt kinda bad saying that as an Afghan taste stan, but this show was pretty mediocre. I just feel like they had a lot more potential with the fact that the actors are genuinely friends in real life, but the plot in itself kinda fell flat for me. It wasn't unpleasant at all and I wasn't bored either. There actually were some really good moments, but this just didn't leave the biggest impression on me. Though I want another off-day show soon, please. Quarantines. I feel like the more time passes, the less I love this show. Don't get me wrong, I do still like this show, but it was actually pretty forgettable. It had a lot of good elements and I liked that it had a more effeminate main character, but the angst and drama lost me because I feel like it didn't really fit the initial vibe of the show I signed up for. The Moment and The Moment Since. Both the original miniseries and the sequel were very cute and wholesome. I just really enjoyed both and feel like the acting, chemistry and production were all good. It was a lovely time. Hook. This was honestly pretty entertaining and I enjoyed the story and the acting, but it doesn't go further than a good show. Quarantine Stories. We love Nadao putting out quality content during a lockdown. This has so many actors I like and even has a GL episode. Every story is great and entertaining, and if you like Game Boys, I don't see why you wouldn't like this show. It's on YouTube with subtitles, so go watch it. My Day. This was pure ridiculousness. Of all the Filipino BL dramas I've watched, while a lot try to emulate the Thai BL vibes, this one does it the most. And despite it having cringy moments, the production not being the best and not having the best acting, this was also quite lovely and the chemistry was really good. So this one is my guilty pleasure, guys. It's not great by any means, but it has very lovable elements. Girl Next Room Midnight Fantasy. I've watched enough Thai dramas to tell you that this is your middle-of-the-road Thai straight romance, and it's pretty enjoyable. Love by Chance 2 A Chance to Love. Tin Can's whole storyline? Perfection. I loved it so much. It actually took me from someone who just liked this ship to a full-blown Tin Can lover. The rest? Kinda trash, not gonna lie. To be honest, it just felt like the sequel lost the original show's essence. Ben and Jim. I honestly really enjoyed this show. It's pretty flawed, but I thought the acting was pretty solid, and the story is totally up my alley. Theory of Love special episode, Stand By Me. I have a full review on this special episode and I'm super biased because I adore the original show, but this was a pretty solid special episode, though still pretty useless as the story had already been told in full. But I enjoyed it nonetheless, though I did miss my Untu tremendously. Still Together, a very useless but very enjoyed sequel. It didn't add much to the Sarawat and Tyne story, but they had many cute moments, and I really enjoyed the development of Mil and Pukong as a Drake Frank fan, and Man Type was really cute. Game Boys. This one is super lovely and inventive. I enjoyed it tremendously, and though the last few episodes did drag on for me a bit, I have a lot of love for this show. The acting was good and the story was simple but very effective. Like in the movies. I know I'm gonna be burned at the stake for not putting this in my top 10, but it is what it is. I really enjoyed this show though. The story is very basic, but the acting and chemistry was good. The only reason why it's not higher on my list is that it didn't stand out for me like it did for so many other people. Gaymarak Auken. Listen, I only watch Lacorns for my favorite actors, and this time it was Joss Whedon who made me watch my very first Lacorn, and I genuinely really enjoyed it. This show has left a really big impression on me. The story was interesting and super entertaining, the acting was frankly stellar, and I just had a really great time. The ending was a bit disappointing, but not that much. If I were to recommend you a Lacorn to start with, this one is it. Why? I did not expect this show to be this good. I just thought it would be pure ridiculousness, but it turned out to actually have amazing characters and a really great main ship. Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely ridiculous and I thought I was on drug half of the time. But there are also very emotional and important moments that genuinely moved me to my core. I enjoyed this one so much and it changes a lot from usual BL dramas, so I'd really recommend it. Bad Genius. This was genuinely super good, but I don't think it was needed either. Since I had already seen the movie, only the last 3 episodes gave me storylines I hadn't already seen. I'd recommend either watching the show or the movie, but the movie is so good I wouldn't want anyone skipping it to watch the series. I loved how much more developed the characters were though, and it was a genuinely enjoyable watch. But it being a remake is actually its biggest flaw. Boys Lockdown. This was genuinely super lovely. I love stories where it's just 2 people falling in love with no drama, and this was definitely it. The acting was good, the story was adorable, and I even loved the transition from one part of the episode to the other. This is an underrated gem and you really need to give it a shot. Followers. Definitely one of the most aesthetically pleasing shows. Some shots of it will stay burned in my mind for the rest of my life. The story was also pretty good, the characters likable, and the fashion of the show had me standing immediately. It does feel like glorification of rich people at times, but apart from that, I thought it was a really solid story, and again, those visuals are insane. Girl Next Room Security Love. I honestly enjoyed this so much. The chemistry was amazing and the story very entertaining. It's just the type of romantic comedies I enjoy a lot, and if you want to branch out of BL, this is totally the type of shows you need to start with. Who Are You? We're finally in my top 10. Finally. I went into this one with zero expectation and a complete misunderstanding of what the plot would be, but ended up really enjoying it nonetheless. The acting was one of the best of the years, and I'm so glad my queen Namta finally got the opportunity to prove herself. The setting was also super pretty and this story was super interesting and entertaining. I genuinely enjoyed this so much, and I'm very glad that even though this didn't get the success it deserves internationally, it did get a lot of success in Thailand. Girl Next Room, Richie Rich. I am completely biased about this one since all of you know I am part of the Off-Jumpo cult. But also Mald is my favorite actress. So when I see my 2 favorite actors getting a ship together, of course I stan immediately. Especially since they're getting a ship again in 46 days. For me, this was the only show from the Girl Next Room series where the male lead was as lovable as the female lead. Both Duchess and Krating are super over the top, yet have very raw moments that make them very lovable. They also had great chemistry, and I would genuinely sell my left kidney for it to have been a full 12 episode series. It was peak entertainment and adorable, and I will never shut up about this show. My Engineer. This one was so unexpectedly lovely. It's by essence the basic Thai BL with too many characters and ships where everyone is gay, and that is super light-hearted. And seeing the kind of year we had, I kinda really needed this. This show is definitely flawed, but I genuinely enjoyed it so much. The acting was pretty solid, the chemistry was very good, and I enjoyed all 4 ships. I liked the friendships, and it was just super entertaining. Together. The first 10 episodes were just so excellent. I can't imagine how much better the show would have been if the last 3 episodes had been just as good. Apart from that, I love this show. The acting was super good, the story basic, but with so much pining and repressed feelings I was dying multiple times per episode. The characters were very lovable, and yeah, I don't actually have anything bad to say about the show except that the 3 last episodes were really bad. Oh, and also the super choppy editing that gave me headaches. Hello Stranger. I truly didn't expect that this would be the 2020 Filipino BL that moved me the most, but it is. I just don't have much bad to say about it. All the characters are extremely lovable, and I truly appreciated that the female characters were not demonized, and that it really made every character's emotions valid. The acting was excellent, and again, my favorite thing in the world, pining. This is definitely one of the best shows of the year, in my opinion. Angel Beside Me. This show blew me away. On one hand, it was pretty childish and could sometimes feel like a children's show, but on the other, this show really dealt with very deep issues of poverty, depression, childhood neglect, and many others. The acting was frankly stellar, and Jane deserves an award for her performance. The chemistry was absolutely beautiful, and this was just a deeply enjoyable show that kept me on my toes from the first episode to the last. Where Your Eyes Linger. This has definitely become one of my favorite BL dramas, period. Again, there's pining, repressed feelings, tension, heartache, all of my favorite things. The acting was absolutely excellent, and while the story could have been basic, it really wasn't. Both characters were highly enjoyable, and their chemistry was no joke. Life. We've gotten to the top 3, you guys. Let's kick it off with an instant favorite. I know this will be a show I'll still enjoy for the many years to come. It has impeccable acting, the story is basic but highly enjoyable, and the characters were very beautifully written. This was just freaking lovely, and I'm so happy this show exists. Cherry Magic. This was not only one of the best BL of the year story-wise, but it was just all around amazing. The characters were also well developed and lovely, but also so respectful of each other. All of their feelings were valid, and you could tell the writers really considered the characters as real people and not just fictional inventions. The chemistry was so different from usual BLs, but absolutely beautiful. The relationship was so healthy and respectful, which doesn't happen often in BL. The plot was, as I said, a breath of fresh air and genuinely so pleasant to follow. The episodes didn't drag at all thanks to their short length, and I already know I'm gonna be rewatching the show many times. And now, my number 1, which is really obvious, I Told Sunset About You. I won't say much because I've already laid out all of my feelings about this gorgeous show in a video, but this was perfection. This show saved 2020 for me.
So, this was it for this video. Again, I'm so thankful for these shows because they're the only thing that kept me sane during this awful year. Here's to a new one together, and have a good day.